They called us primitive. They called us weak. For 300 years, the galaxy watched us crawl through our solar system like insects learning to walk. They laughed when we sent our first ships beyond Mars. They pitted us when we begged for scraps of technology at their cosmic table. But here is the truth they never understood. We were not slow because we were stupid. We were slow because we were careful. We were not weak because we lacked power. We were weak because we chose to be. And when the Dominion finally pushed us too far, when they finally gave us a reason to stop pretending, the entire galaxy learned why humanity had been holding back. They learned it in exactly 5 hours. The transmission came at 0347 hours, Earth Standard Time, on a Tuesday morning that would later be remembered as the last peaceful day in galactic history. Admiral Chen Weilin stood in the command center of the United Earth Defense Platform Prometheus, her coffee growing cold in her hands as she watched the emergency broadcast paint the holographic display in shades of crimson and orange. "Confirm the source," she said, her voice steady despite the ice forming in her stomach. Commander Marcus Okonkwo worked his console with practiced precision, his dark fingers dancing across haptic interfaces that responded to his touch like water to stone. "Confirmed, Admiral. The signal originates from New Geneva Colony. Population: 4.7 million civilians. The distress beacon activated 17 minutes ago." Chen set down her coffee. She would not drink it again for a very long time. "Show me." The holographic display shifted, and the command center fell into absolute silence. 37 officers stopped breathing at the same moment, their eyes fixed on the image that materialized before them. New Geneva had been a jewel of human expansion, a testament to 3 generations of terraforming and development on a world that humanity had lovingly coaxed into habitability. The colonists had built cities of white stone and green gardens, universities and hospitals, theaters and parks where children played under an alien sun that they had learned to call home. Now it burned. The orbital cameras showed a world wrapped in fire. Great swaths of the northern continent had been reduced to glass, the heat so intense that the ground itself had melted and reformed into smooth, reflective surfaces that caught the light of the flames, still consuming the forest to the south. The oceans boiled at the edges where the attacks had struck, sending pillars of steam into an atmosphere choked with ash and death. "The Dominion," someone whispered, and the word carried the weight of centuries. Admiral Chun did not need confirmation. She recognized the signature of Dominion weapons as intimately as she recognized her own heartbeat. For 300 years, humanity had studied their technology from afar, had begged and bargained, and occasionally stolen glimpses of the power that the elder races wielded so casually. The Dominion controlled 47% of the known galaxy, a coalition of 12 species united under the iron claw of the Vorthan hierarchy. They had conquered worlds beyond counting, had exterminated civilizations that failed to submit, and had watched humanity's fumbling expansion with the amused contempt of giants observing ants. "Casualty estimates," Chin said. Okonkwo's voice cracked, just slightly, on the first word. "Based on population distribution and the areas of heaviest bombardment, we estimate 3.2 million dead in the initial strike. The remaining 1.5 million are concentrated in the southern hemisphere, but the atmospheric contamination will reach them within 6 hours. Without immediate evacuation, total loss of colony is certain. Time to reach New Geneva with our fastest ships. 14 hours at maximum burn, Admiral." Chin closed her eyes. 14 hours. The math was simple and brutal. By the time any human vessel could reach New Geneva, there would be nothing left to save. The Dominion had calculated their attack with the precision of a species that had been waging interstellar war for 10,000 years. They had struck at the perfect moment from the perfect angle with the perfect weapons to ensure that humanity could do nothing but watch. Why? The question came from Lieutenant Sarah O'Yelleran, the youngest officer in the command center, her voice trembling with an emotion that fell somewhere between grief and rage. "We were not at war. We had treaties. We had agreements. We paid their taxes and followed their rules and stayed in our designated territories. Why would they do this?" Admiral Chin opened her eyes and looked at the young officer with something that might have been pity or might have been the first spark of something far more dangerous. "Because they could, Lieutenant. Because they have always been able to do whatever they wished, and we have never been able to stop them. Because we're insects to them, and Insects do not get to ask questions. The command center hummed with the quiet sounds of grief and shock, the soft weeping of officers who had family on New Geneva, the harsh breathing of those struggling to maintain composure, the terrible silence of those who had simply stopped processing what they were seeing. Admiral Chun allowed them 30 seconds. Then, she straightened her spine, squared her shoulders, and became the person she had trained her entire life to become. Open a channel to Earth Command, she ordered. Priority Alpha. Authorization Chun 779 Omega. Okonkwo looked up sharply. Admiral, that authorization will wake the entire chain of command. The Secretary General, the Joint Chiefs, I know exactly what it will do, Commander. Open the channel. The holographic display flickered as the most secure communication network ever constructed by human hands came to life. Within seconds, faces began appearing in the air around Admiral Chun. Grave faces, tired faces, faces that had clearly been roused from sleep only to be confronted with humanity's worst nightmare. Secretary General Elena Vasquez materialized first, her silver hair disheveled, her eyes sharp despite the hour. Behind her came the Joint Chiefs of the United Earth Defense Force, then the directors of the various intelligence agencies, then the leaders of the major nation-states that still maintain nominal sovereignty within the planetary government. Admiral Chun, Vasquez said, her voice carrying the weight of her office and the burden of the moment. We have received preliminary reports. Is it as bad as they say? Worse, Madam Secretary. New Geneva is gone. 4.7 million of our people are dead or dying, and there is nothing we can do to save them. The Dominion has committed an act of genocide against a civilian colony, in direct violation of 17 separate treaties and agreements. They have done this openly, deliberately, and without provocation. The faces in the holographic display registered shock, horror, and, finally, something harder. Secretary General Vasquez's expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something that Chun recognized from her own mirror. It was the look of someone who had spent their entire life hoping that a certain day would never come, and who now understood that it had finally arrived. The protocol, Vasquez said. It was not a question. Admiral Chun nodded slowly. Yes, Madam Secretary. The protocol. The silence that followed was different from the shocked quiet that had gripped the command center earlier. This silence was heavy with history, with secrets, with the weight of decisions made by people long dead and carried forward by their descendants. This silence was the sound of humanity reaching into its deepest vaults and pulling out the thing it had hidden there for 3 centuries. I need to explain something, Chun said, and her voice carried to every corner of the command center, to every face on the holographic display, to the recording devices that would preserve this moment for future generations. For 300 years, humanity has played a role. We have pretended to be primitive. We have pretended to be weak. We have begged for scraps of technology from species that look down on us with contempt. We have accepted insults and exploitation and the status of second-class citizens in a galaxy that viewed us as curiosities at best and vermin at worst. She paused, letting the words sink in. This was not because we were actually primitive or weak. This was a strategy, a deliberate, calculated, multi-generational strategy designed by our ancestors and carried forward by every government since first contact. General Harrison Brooks, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. Admiral, perhaps we should continue this conversation on a more secure channel. There's no more need for secrecy, General. The Dominion has forced our hand. They have given us no choice but to reveal what we are. Chin turned back to the holographic display, where the burning world of New Geneva continued its slow death. For 300 years, we have been preparing. While we pretended to struggle with basic interstellar travel, we were developing technology that the elder races cannot imagine. While we accepted their scraps and acted grateful, we were building weapons that would make their entire fleets obsolete. While they laughed at our primitive ships and our fumbling diplomacy, we were creating something new, something they have never seen before. Lieutenant O'Yelleran stared at her commanding officer with wide eyes. Admiral, are you saying that everything we know about human technology is a lie? Not everything, Lieutenant. The ships you see every day, the weapons we deploy, the technology we use for civilian purposes, all of that is real. It is simply not all that we have. Think of it as the difference between what a person shows to the world and what they keep locked away for emergencies. Humanity has been showing the galaxy our public face for 3 centuries. Now, for the first time, we're going to show them what we keep in our basement. Secretary General Vasquez spoke with the careful precision of someone choosing their words for the history books. Admiral Chun, by the authority vested in me as Secretary General of the United Earth Government, I am authorizing the implementation of Protocol Omega. All restrictions on classified military technologies are hereby lifted. All deep space assets are to be activated and brought to full operational status. And, Admiral Chun, you are hereby promoted to Supreme Commander of all human military forces. You have full authority to respond to the attack on New Geneva as you see fit. Chun saluted, a gesture that suddenly carried far more weight than it ever had before. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I will not waste this trust. She turned to Commander Okonkwo. Begin activation sequence for all Omega-class assets. Wake the sleepers. Bring the Shadow Fleet online. And open a channel to the Dominion Command frequency. The Dominion Command frequency? Okonkwo repeated, his voice rising with surprise. Admiral, we have never been able to break their encryption. We do not even know if... Commander, please trust me when I say that we broke their encryption approximately 247 years ago. We have been listening to their communications ever since, while carefully maintaining the illusion that we could not. Open the channel. The holographic display shifted once more, and a new set of figures appeared. These were not human. The Vorthen were tall, impossibly thin creatures with skin the color of dried blood and eyes that burned with the cold fire of a species that had conquered worlds for millennia. Their leader, High Commander Kethrax, looked at the human transmission with an expression of mild amusement, like a teacher entertained by the antics of a particularly stupid student. Ah, the insects have learned to use our communication systems, Kethrax said, his voice translated by software that humans had supposedly never developed. How amusing. I assume you're calling to surrender? It would be the wise choice. Submit to the Dominion, accept the status of a client species, and we may allow some of your people to survive as laborers. Admiral Chin smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. High Commander, I am calling to offer you a chance to surrender. The silence that followed was broken by laughter, not just from Kethrax, but from every Vorthen officer visible in the transmission. They laughed with the genuine amusement of those who have heard the funniest joke in the galaxy, the absolute certainty of those who have never known defeat. The insect offers us a chance to surrender, Kethrax said, wiping what might have been tears from his burning eyes. Oh, this is precious. I will have to share this recording with the other High Commanders. They will find it most entertaining as we divide up your territory. I thought you might react this way, Chin said. That is why I have prepared a demonstration. Please direct your attention to the following coordinates. She transmitted a series of numbers that made the Vorthen officers frown in confusion. These coordinates are in the void of Kethmar, one of the officers said. There is nothing there. It is empty space, far from any star system or resources. There is something there, Chun corrected. There has been something there for approximately 200 years. You simply never noticed it because we did not want you to. The Vorthen officers exchanged glances of confusion and the first hints of concern. High Commander Kethrax gestured impatiently, and one of his subordinates brought up a sensor display showing the coordinates Chun had transmitted. For a long moment, there was nothing but empty space, the dark void between stars that the Dominion had never bothered to patrol because there was nothing there worth patrolling. Then the void began to move. At first, it looked like the stars themselves were shifting, rearranging themselves in patterns that made no sense. Then, the Vorthen officers realized that they were not seeing stars at all. They were seeing lights. Millions of lights, billions of lights. Lights that stretched across a volume of space larger than most star systems. And as their sensors struggled to make sense of what they were witnessing, the lights revealed themselves to be ships. Human ships. Ships of impossible size and impossible design. Ships that dwarfed anything the Dominion had ever built. Ships that should not exist because the primitive insects had barely mastered interstellar travel. Ships that were now coming online after 2 centuries of silent waiting in the darkness between stars. What is this? Kethrax demanded, his voice suddenly sharp with something that might have been fear. This is impossible. You do not have the technology to build vessels of this size. You do not have the resources. You do not have the knowledge. You are correct that we did not have the knowledge when we first made contact with your species, Chun said, her smile growing wider. But, you see, High Commander, humans have a quality that your species has always underestimated. We learn, we adapt, we improve. And we have been doing all of those things for 300 years while you sat in your thrones and laughed at us. The Shadow Fleet continued to emerge from dormancy, systems that had waited in cold sleep for generations now roaring to life with power sources that the Dominion could not identify, weapon systems that their sensors could not classify, and drive technologies that seemed to bend the very fabric of space in ways that violated everything the elder races understood about physics. In exactly 1 hour, Admiral Chun continued, those ships will begin moving toward Dominion space. And when they arrive, High Commander, they will teach your people a lesson that you should have learned a long time ago. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with 300 years of suppressed fury. Never mistake patience for weakness. Never confuse caution with cowardice. And never, ever attack an enemy you do not truly understand. The transmission ended, and Admiral Chun turned to face her staff. The command center had transformed during the conversation. Officers who had been weeping with grief now stood straight, with jaws set in determination. The shock had given way to something harder, something that had been waiting for this moment since the day humanity first looked up at the stars and understood that they were not alone. Begin fleet coordination, Chen ordered. All Omega-class vessels are to converge at staging point Helios within 45 minutes. We will execute a simultaneous strike on every major Dominion military installation in range. Our objective is not conquest. Our objective is not even revenge, though I understand if some of you feel that impulse. She looked at the image of New Geneva one final time, at the world of fire and death that had been home to millions of her people. Our objective is simple. We're going to show the galaxy what humanity truly is. We're going to demonstrate, in terms that no species will ever forget, the consequences of attacking our people. And we're going to do it so quickly, so completely, and so absolutely that no one will ever dare threaten us again. How long do you estimate the operation will take, Admiral? Okonkwo asked. Chun considered the question carefully. She had studied the Dominion's military capabilities for decades, had run simulations using technology that the elder races could not imagine, had prepared for this moment since the day she first learned the truth about humanity's hidden strength. The answer came to her with the certainty of mathematics. 5 hours, she said. The war will be over in 5 hours. Around her, the Shadow Fleet continued to awaken, and the galaxy prepared to learn what humanity had been hiding all along. The first Dominion world to fall was Keth-Vorith Prime, the jewel of the Vorthan hierarchy, and the administrative center of their 47% grip on the galaxy. For 10,000 years, it had stood as a monument to Vorthan supremacy, its orbital defenses considered impenetrable, its military installations the most advanced in known space. The attack happened so quickly that most of the population did not realize they were under assault until it was already over. Captain Yuki Tanaka stood on the bridge of the UEDS Awakening, one of the first Omega-class vessels to reach combat range, and watched as her ship's weapons did things that should have been impossible. The Vorthan Defense Grid, a network of satellites and orbital platforms that had protected this world for millennia, simply ceased to exist. There was no dramatic battle, no exchange of fire that could be called a fight. One moment the defenses were there, the next they were particles of metal and energy dissipating into the void. Target elimination confirmed, her weapons officer reported, his voice carrying the strange calm of someone who had trained for this moment his entire life without ever truly believing it would come. Orbital grid neutralized in 17 seconds. Surface military installations marked and ready for secondary strike. Tanaka nodded, her hands steady on the arms of her command chair despite the enormity of what she was witnessing. Initiate Phase 2. Non-lethal suppression of all remaining military forces. Civilian infrastructure is not to be touched. I want precision so fine that not a single child loses their home. The UEDS Awakening and the 700 other Omega-class vessels that had materialized in Keth-Vorith Prime's orbital space began their work with surgical precision. The weapons they employed had no equivalent in any Dominion database. They did not simply destroy, they discriminated. Beams of energy passed through civilian buildings without leaving a scratch, only to vaporize the military command bunker in the basement. Missiles phased through residential districts like ghosts, rematerializing only when they reached their military targets. It was less like war and more like watching a master surgeon remove a tumor while leaving every healthy cell intact. In the planetary capital, High Commander Kethrax watched his world's military might evaporate with an expression of blank incomprehension. He had spent 3,000 years as the supreme military authority of the Vorthan people, had personally overseen the conquest of dozens of worlds, had believed himself to be a master of warfare in a galaxy where the Dominion's supremacy was as certain as the laws of physics. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. "How is this possible?" he demanded, his voice cracking with an emotion that his species rarely displayed. "Their technology is centuries behind ours. They cannot even achieve proper, faster-than-light travel without our scraps. This is not happening. This cannot be happening." His tactical officers stared at displays that showed nothing but failure. "High Commander, our weapons cannot lock onto their vessels. Our shields have no effect against their attacks. Our communications are being selectively jammed. We can speak to civilian networks, but all military frequencies are blocked. They're not just defeating us. They're demonstrating that they could have defeated us at any time." Kethrax sank into his command throne, his mind struggling to process the fundamental rewriting of reality that was occurring before his eyes. For the first time in his ancient life, he began to understand what it felt like to be on the other side of absolute power. 12 light years away, Admiral Chun observed the simultaneous attacks on 17 Dominion worlds through a holographic display that showed her forces operating with the coordination of a single organism. Each fleet knew its role, each ship understood its targets, and each commander executed their mission with a precision that came from 2 centuries of planning and preparation. Keth Vorith Prime's military capability has been reduced to 0, Commander Okonkwo reported. Civilian casualties? None. Infrastructure damage? None. Political and military leadership is intact and available for negotiation. Excellent. Move to Phase 3. I want communication channels open to every world we have neutralized. It is time for the Dominion to hear our terms. The face of Admiral Chun appeared on screens across 17 worlds simultaneously, transmitted with a clarity and reach that demonstrated humanity's complete mastery of Dominion communication networks. Behind her, the burning image of New Geneva served as both reminder and warning. "Citizens of the Dominion," she began, her voice carrying the weight of 300 years of humiliation and the power of 300 years of preparation. 47 minutes ago, your military forces committed an act of genocide against a peaceful human colony. 4.7 million of my people are dead because your leaders believed we were too weak to respond. They were wrong. The holographic display shifted, showing real-time images of Dominion military installations across multiple worlds. All of them neutralized, all of them silent, all of them serving as proof that humanity's words were not empty threats. In the past 47 minutes, we have disabled every major military installation in the Kethrav sector. Your orbital defenses are gone. Your command structures are isolated. Your weapons are silent. And we have done all of this without harming a single civilian or destroying a single piece of non-military infrastructure. This is not because we lack the power to destroy. This is because destruction was never our goal. Chun paused, letting the weight of her next words build. Our goal is to make you understand. For 300 years, we have watched your Dominion conquer and destroy. We have seen you exterminate species for refusing to submit. We have witnessed your casual cruelty toward those you consider lesser beings. And we have been waiting for the right moment, waiting until we had the power to respond not with mere revenge, but with absolute certainty. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with controlled fury. New Geneva was not just an attack on a colony. It was a test. Your leaders wanted to see how the primitive insects would respond to having their nest kicked. Well, here is your answer. We do not respond with desperation. We do not respond with panic. We respond with overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. And we are only getting started. On Keth Vorith Prime, High Commander Kethrax watched the human transmission with a growing sense of dread. Around him, his advisors and subordinates stood in stunned silence, their worldview shattering with each word the human admiral spoke. Everything they had believed about the galaxy was being rewritten in real time, and they had no idea how to process it. She speaks of more attacks, his tactical officer whispered. High Commander, if they can do this to 17 worlds simultaneously, what is to stop them from doing it to all of our worlds? Kethrax had no answer. He had spent his entire career studying military strategy, understanding force projection, calculating the logistics of conquest. But all of his knowledge was based on the assumption that the Dominion was the supreme military power in the galaxy. That assumption had just been proven catastrophically false. Admiral Chun continued her broadcast. We are not here to conquer you. We are not interested in ruling your worlds or enslaving your populations. We have no desire to become what you have been. But we will be treated as equals. From this moment forward, humanity will be recognized as a sovereign power with full rights and protections under galactic law. Our colonies will be respected. Our people will be safe. And any species that threatens us will learn the same lesson you're learning today. She held up a data chip, its crystalline surface catching the light. I'm transmitting our terms to your leadership. They're simple. Full recognition of human sovereignty. Reparations for the people of New Geneva. Immediate cessation of all military operations against human territory. And a formal apology from the Vorthan hierarchy for the unprovoked attack on our people. And if we refuse, Kethrax transmitted, his voice carrying across the communication channel with the last vestiges of his pride. If we choose to fight rather than submit to your demands. Chen's smile carried no warmth whatsoever. High Commander, you are welcome to try. But I should inform you that the forces currently neutralizing your 17 worlds represent approximately 3% of humanity's true military capability. We have been building and hiding for 300 years. We have ships you have never seen, weapons you cannot imagine, and technologies that your scientists would need centuries to understand. If you choose to fight, we will not show the same restraint we have shown today. She paused, letting the implications sink in. You have destroyed one of our colonies. We have the power to destroy all of yours. The question you must ask yourself is simple. Is your pride worth the extinction of your species? The transmission ended, and across 17 Dominion worlds, the same debate began. Military commanders who had never known defeat struggled to accept their new reality. Political leaders who had ruled with absolute authority suddenly found themselves facing decisions that could determine the survival of their people. And ordinary citizens, who had grown up believing that the Dominion was invincible, looked up at skies filled with human vessels and began to understand that the galaxy had changed forever. In the command center of the UEDS Prometheus, Admiral Chun turned to face her staff with an expression that mixed triumph with sorrow. That was the easy part, she said quietly. Now comes the hard part. We have shown them our strength. Now we have to convince them that we are not monsters. Commander Okonkwo looked confused. Admiral, we have just achieved the most decisive military victory in galactic history. The Dominion's core worlds are completely at our mercy. Why would they think we are monsters? Chun walked to the holographic display, where the image of New Geneva still burned. Because that is what they would do, Commander. In their entire history, the Dominion has never shown mercy to a defeated enemy. They cannot imagine that we would be different. They are waiting for us to begin the slaughter, to reduce their cities to ash, to prove that we are exactly the same kind of conquerors they have always been. She turned back to face her officers. And that is precisely why we must prove them wrong. Every action we take from this moment forward will define humanity's place in the galaxy for centuries to come. We can be the species that avenged New Geneva with justice and restraint, or we could be the species that traded one tyrant for another. I know which legacy I prefer. The communication officer interrupted with a priority transmission. Admiral, we are receiving surrender signals from 47 Dominion military installations across the affected sectors. They are offering unconditional capitulation and requesting immediate cessation of hostilities. Already, Lieutenant O'Yelleran asked, surprised. It has been less than an hour since the attack began. That is the point, Lieutenant. Chen allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. We did not want a war. We wanted a demonstration so overwhelming that war would become unnecessary. The Dominion built their empire on the assumption that military might makes right. We have just proven that they no longer have military might. Their choices now are to accept our terms or to watch everything they have built crumble into dust. She straightened her uniform and prepared for the next phase. Accept their surrenders with grace and dignity. Treat prisoners according to the highest standards of military law. Ensure that medical teams are available for any Dominion personnel who require care. And begin transmitting the following message to all Dominion worlds. Humanity comes not as conquerors, but as equals. Those who accept this will find us to be generous friends. Those who do not will learn why our friendship is preferable to our opposition. As her orders were transmitted across the fleet, Admiral Chun allowed herself a moment of private reflection. For 3 centuries, humanity had played the role of the primitive newcomer, the species too weak to matter, the insects crawling at the feet of giants. That era had ended in less than an hour. But the era that was beginning would be far more challenging. The Dominion had ruled through fear and force, and those tools had served them well for 10,000 years. Now, humanity had demonstrated that it possessed even greater force. But it was choosing to rule through something different. It was choosing to offer the galaxy a new way of doing things, a path that did not require conquest and subjugation. Whether the galaxy would accept that offer remained to be seen. On the surface of Keth-Vorith Prime, High Commander Kethrax sat in the ruins of his certainty and tried to understand what had just happened. His military was gone, neutralized so quickly that it barely qualified as a battle. His government was in chaos, with leaders who had never faced defeat struggling to comprehend their new reality. And above his world, human ships hung in orbit like a promise, and a threat rolled into one. His aide approached cautiously, carrying a data tablet with the formal terms of surrender. High Commander, the human demands have been transmitted. They are not what we expected. Kethrax took the tablet with hands that trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the disorientation of having his entire worldview overturned in less than an hour. He read the human terms slowly, his expression shifting from confusion to something that might have been hope. They do not demand territory, he said, his voice carrying genuine surprise. They do not demand tribute or slaves or subjugation. They want recognition as equals. They want reparations for their dead. They want an apology. Yes, High Commander. It is as if they fought this entire battle simply to be treated with respect. Kethrax set down the tablet and looked up at the sky, where human vessels continued their patient vigil. For the first time in his long life, he began to understand that the galaxy might be changing in ways that went far beyond military power. Perhaps, he said slowly, we have been doing things wrong for a very long time. The aide stared at him with shock. High Commander, we built our empire on conquest and fear. We believed that the strong must dominate the weak, that there was no other way to organize a civilization. But these humans, he gestured at the sky, at the ships that could have destroyed everything and had chosen not to. They have the power to do what we have always done. They have the strength to crush us and take everything we have. And instead, they ask only to be treated as equals. They offer us terms that allow us to keep our dignity. He stood, his ancient bones creaking with the effort. I'm going to accept their terms. And then I'm going to do something that no High Commander has ever done before. I'm going to apologize. The surrender of Keth-Vorith Prime sent shockwaves through the Dominion. World after world, facing the reality of human military superiority, began to calculate the cost of resistance versus the benefits of accommodation. And as more worlds chose accommodation, a cascade began that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Admiral Chun watched it all from the command center of the Prometheus, her expression thoughtful as reports of surrenders and negotiations flooded in from across Dominion space. The war was proceeding exactly as planned, but she knew that the real challenge was only beginning. Madam Admiral, her communications officer reported, we are receiving a priority transmission from Earth. The Secretary-General wishes to speak with you immediately. Shin nodded and activated the secure channel. Secretary-General Vasquez appeared in the holographic display, her face showing a complex mixture of pride, relief, and concern. Admiral Chun, on behalf of the people of Earth and all human colonies, I want to express our profound gratitude for what you have accomplished today. Less than 2 hours ago, we were a species mourning a genocide. Now we are on the verge of reshaping the entire galactic order. Thank you, Madam Secretary. But I sense that you have concerns as well. Vasquez nodded slowly. The rest of the galaxy is watching, Admiral. Not just the Dominion, all of them. The crystalline collective, the deep ones, the machine minds, the star weavers. Every species in known space is trying to understand what humanity has just revealed about itself. And many of them are afraid. They should be, Chen said simply. But not of us. They should be afraid of themselves. They have spent millennia accepting the Dominion's brutality as the natural order of things. Now, they're learning that it does not have to be that way. That terrifies them because it means they have a choice. They can continue to accept tyranny, or they can demand better. And if they demand better, if they look to us to provide it, Chen considered the question carefully. Then we will do our best to be worthy of that trust. We did not prepare for 3 centuries just to become new tyrants, Madam Secretary. We prepared because we believed that the galaxy deserved better than the Dominion. Now we have the opportunity to prove that belief was justified. Vasquez smiled, though her eyes remained serious. The history books will remember this day, Admiral. Let us hope they remember us kindly. With respect, Madam Secretary, I am not concerned about history books. I am concerned about the 4.7 million people who died on New Geneva. Every decision I make, every order I give, will be measured against their memory. Did we honor their sacrifice by building something better? Did we use the power they paid for with their lives to create a galaxy worth living in? She straightened in her command chair, her resolve hardening. In 3 hours, the formal surrender negotiations will begin. By the 5-hour mark, the war will be officially over. And then the real work starts. Building alliances, establishing trust, showing every species in the galaxy that humanity's strength is not a threat, but an opportunity. And the Dominion? What becomes of them? That will be up to them. We are offering them a place in the new order, not as conquerors but as equals. Some will accept, some will resist, but they will all learn that the galaxy has changed, and that change is not going away. Admiral Chun turned back to the holographic display, where the map of the galaxy showed the expanding sphere of human influence. What had been a few scattered colonies was now a power that rivaled the Dominion itself, and the other species were watching to see what humanity would do with that power. The next 3 hours would determine whether humanity had truly earned its place among the stars, or whether it had simply replaced one tyrant with another. The negotiations took place in a location that no species had ever visited before, a station called Unity, hidden in the spaces between stars where no light had shone for billions of years. Admiral Chun had chosen it deliberately. By forcing the Dominion leaders to travel to a human station, she was making a statement that needed no words. The power had shifted, and everyone present understood it. High Commander Kethrax stood in the docking bay of Unity Station, his ancient eyes taking in every detail of the structure around him. The technology was beyond anything he had imagined possible. Walls that seemed to flow like liquid metal, gravity that adjusted itself to each species' preference, and lighting that responded to mood and need without any visible controls. If the humans had revealed this station 300 years ago, he thought the Dominion would have known immediately that they were not dealing with primitives. But that was the point, was it not? The humans had wanted to be underestimated. They had wanted to be dismissed. And now, after 3 centuries of patient preparation, they had proven exactly why underestimating them had been the greatest mistake in Dominion history. High Commander Kethrax, Admiral Chun approached with her delegation, her uniform crisp and her bearing military precise. Thank you for accepting our invitation to discuss terms. I was not aware that I had a choice, Kethrax replied, his voice carrying the bitterness of defeat. Chen's expression did not change. You always have a choice, High Commander. You could have chosen to fight to the last soldier, to die rather than accept defeat. Many species have made that choice when facing the Dominion. The fact that you are here, negotiating, tells me that you are wiser than your predecessors. She gestured toward a corridor that seemed to extend into infinity. Please follow me. We have much to discuss, and time is short. The galaxy is watching, and they deserve to see that this can be resolved peacefully. The negotiation chamber was a masterpiece of psychological design. The table was round, with no head position that would suggest superiority. The lighting was neutral, the temperature carefully calibrated to be comfortable for all species present. Every detail communicated the same message. We are equals here, regardless of what happened outside. Representatives from 17 Dominion worlds had been summoned, along with High Commander Kethrax and his senior advisors. Facing them sat Admiral Chun and her delegation, which included not just military officers but diplomats, scientists, and cultural advisors. The message was clear: humanity had come to build, not just to fight. Let us begin with the obvious, Chen said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. 47 minutes ago, Dominion forces destroyed New Geneva Colony, killing 4.7 million human civilians. This was an act of genocide, committed without provocation, without warning, and without justification. Before we discuss anything else, I need to hear you acknowledge this. Kethrax shifted uncomfortably. The Vorthan had a long tradition of never admitting fault, of treating any sign of weakness as an invitation for attack. But the ships orbiting his homeworld made such considerations obsolete. The attack on New Geneva was... He paused, struggling with words that his species rarely used. The attack was wrong. It was ordered by the Dominion Council as a demonstration of power to remind humanity of its proper place. We believed that a show of force would end any thoughts of human resistance before they could begin. And instead, Shun prompted. Instead, we learned that we had fundamentally misunderstood what we were dealing with. Kethrax met her eyes, and for the first time, there was something approaching respect in his gaze. We saw insects where we should have seen predators. We saw weakness where we should have seen patience. We saw primitives where we should have seen strategists who had been outmaneuvering us for 3 centuries. A fair assessment. Shun leaned forward. Now let me tell you what happens next. We are not interested in conquest. We are not interested in revenge. What we want is much simpler and much more profound. She activated a holographic display that showed the entire galaxy, with Dominion territory highlighted in red and human territory in blue. For 10,000 years, the Dominion has organized the galaxy through force. You conquered the weak. You absorbed the useful. You exterminated the defiant. And you created a system where every species lived in fear of becoming your next target. The display shifted, showing lines of connection spreading outward from human space. We are offering an alternative, a galactic community based on mutual respect, shared development, and collective security. Not an empire ruled by the strongest, but an alliance of equals working together for common benefit. A Dominion diplomat spoke up, her voice carrying the skepticism of someone who had seen many promises broken. Pretty words, Admiral. But history teaches us that power seeks to expand. Today you speak of equality and cooperation. What will you speak of in a century, when your power has grown even greater and ours has faded? Chin nodded, acknowledging the validity of the concern. You are right to be skeptical. Every conquering species has claimed noble intentions. Every empire has spoken of peace while sharpening its swords. So let me offer you something more than words. She transmitted a data package to every representative present. What you are receiving is the complete technical specifications for our defensive shield technology. Not our offensive weapons. Those will remain classified. But the shields that protected our ships during the recent engagement, the technology that made your weapons useless, we're giving it to you freely. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Representatives looked at each other with expressions of disbelief. Even Kethrax seemed stunned. You are giving us weapons? One of the Dominion officers asked. After we just attacked your colony? We are giving you the ability to defend yourselves, Chun corrected. Against us if necessary. This technology will spread throughout the galaxy. Within a decade, every species will have the ability to make themselves effectively invulnerable to attack. And that means that conquest will become impossible for everyone, including us. Kethrax stared at the data, scrolling across his tablet. This is madness. No species in the history of the galaxy has ever voluntarily given away a military advantage of this magnitude, which is precisely why we are doing it. Chen's voice carried absolute conviction. The Dominion's power rested on the simple fact that you could destroy anyone who opposed you. Our power rests on something different. We want a galaxy where no one can destroy anyone else. Where disputes are resolved through negotiation because war has become impossible. Where species cooperate because there is no alternative. She spread her hands in a gesture of openness. You are afraid that we will become the new Dominion. Fair enough. So we are removing the possibility. In a decade, our military advantage will be meaningless because everyone will have the same defensive capabilities. At that point, our strength will come not from weapons but from alliances, trade relationships, and shared interests. If we turn tyrannical, the galaxy will simply turn its back on us, and we will have nothing. The silence in the chamber was profound. Representatives who had spent their entire careers navigating the brutal politics of Dominion power were struggling to comprehend what they were hearing. It was as if the fundamental rules of the universe had suddenly changed. There must be conditions, a crystalline collective observer said. The crystalline collective had not been part of the Dominion, but they had observed its activities for millennia. No species gives such a gift without expecting something in return. Of course there are conditions, Chen acknowledged. First, the formal acknowledgement of human sovereignty and the recognition of our rights under galactic law. Second, reparations for New Geneva, not in territory or resources, but in the form of a memorial and an educational program that will ensure no species ever forgets what happened there. Third, the immediate cessation of all Dominion expansion activities and the recognition of the independence of any species that requests it. That would dissolve the Dominion entirely, Kethrax protested. Not necessarily. Any species that wishes to remain in the Dominion Alliance is free to do so. But they must remain by choice, not by force. The Dominion can continue to exist as a voluntary federation of species working together, or it can dissolve into its component parts, each pursuing their own destiny. That is for you to decide, not us. Chun stood and walked to the observation window, where the stars shone in their eternal patterns. Hi, Commander. I'm going to tell you something that few humans have ever heard. Something that explains why we have done what we have done, why we hid our strength for 3 centuries, and why we are now offering you peace instead of destruction. She turned to face the assembled representatives. When humanity first discovered that we were not alone in the universe, we were terrified. The Dominion seemed invincible. Your technology was centuries ahead of ours. Your fleets could have wiped out our species before we even knew we were under attack. We were insects, just as you said, crawling on the surface of our little planet while God strode among the stars. Her voice softened, taking on a note of something that might have been wonder. But instead of despairing, we asked ourselves a question. Why? Why had the universe created beings capable of such destruction? What was the point of species that could shatter worlds and extinguish stars if all they did was fight and conquer and destroy? We cannot find an answer, but we believe there had to be one. We believe that the universe was not simply a vast killing ground where the strong crushed the weak for all eternity. We believe that there had to be something better, some purpose to all this power beyond mere domination. Chun returned to her seat, her eyes moving across the faces of every representative present. So we decided to become the answer we were looking for. We built our strength not to conquer, but to protect. We developed our technology not to destroy, but to transform. We prepared for this moment, not to establish an empire, but to offer the galaxy a choice. And that choice, Kethrax asked, the same choice we made 3 centuries ago. You can continue as you have always been, fighting, conquering, destroying. Or you can join us in building something new. A galaxy where power is used to create rather than to destroy. Where species work together because cooperation produces better outcomes than conflict. Where the strong protect the weak instead of exploiting them. She leaned forward, her intensity filling the chamber. I know this sounds idealistic. I know it sounds naive, but consider this. 47 minutes ago, we demonstrated that we have the power to destroy the Dominion completely. We could have reduced your worlds to ash, enslaved your populations, taken everything you have built over 10,000 years. Instead, we neutralized your military with surgical precision and came here to negotiate. That is not weakness. That is strength directed by purpose. The representatives sat in contemplative silence. What Admiral Chun was proposing went against everything they had learned about power and politics. It contradicted 10,000 years of galactic history. It suggested that everything they had believed about the nature of the universe was wrong. And yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans had the power to conquer. They were choosing not to use it. That simple fact forced everyone present to reconsider their assumptions about what was possible. High Commander Kethrax spoke first. If we accept your terms, what happens to our people? To our culture? To the Vorthan way of life? Shin considered the question carefully. Your people will continue as they always have, with one exception. You will no longer be able to use force against other species. Your fleets will be reconfigured for defense, your military traditions adapted for peacekeeping. But your culture, your art, your philosophy, your way of understanding the universe, all of that remains yours. And if we refuse? If we choose to fight rather than accept these conditions, then we will destroy your military capability completely rather than simply neutralizing it. We will establish defensive perimeters around every Dominion world, preventing you from expanding or attacking. And we will wait. Eventually, your people will choose differently. Hopefully, that choice will come before too many generations have passed in isolation. Kethrax was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he rose to his feet. The other Dominion representatives watched him with a mixture of anticipation and dread, knowing that whatever he said next would determine the fate of their civilization. For 10,000 years, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of history, the Vorthen have defined ourselves by our strength. We believed that conquest was our destiny, that the strong existed to rule the weak, that power was its own justification. Today, I learned that we were wrong. He looked at Admiral Chun with eyes that had seen millennia of war. You have shown us a different kind of strength. The strength to refrain from destruction when destruction was easy. The strength to offer mercy when vengeance was justified. The strength to give away power in pursuit of something greater than power. His voice caught slightly, but he continued, I accept your terms. Not because I have no choice, though that is also true. I accept because you have shown me that there is a better way. And I believe that the Vorthen people, for all our faults, are capable of learning. He extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Admiral Chen rose and took it. Then, let this moment mark the beginning of a new era, she said. Not the triumph of humanity over the Dominion, but the birth of a galactic community that we will build together. The other representatives began to rise, one by one, adding their voices to the chorus of agreement. Some spoke with genuine enthusiasm, others with careful calculation, still others with reluctant acceptance of the new reality. But all of them recognized that something fundamental had changed. The Dominion, as it had existed for 10,000 years, was over. What would replace it was still undefined, still fragile, still dependent on countless decisions that had yet to be made. But, for the first time in galactic history, that replacement was being built on cooperation rather than conquest. As the formal negotiations continued, Admiral Chun allowed herself a moment of private reflection. She thought of New Geneva, of the 4.7 million people who had died so that this moment could occur. She thought of the generations of humans who had worked in secret, building and preparing for a day they would never see. And she thought of the future, still unwritten, still full of dangers and possibilities. The war had lasted 5 hours. The peace would take centuries to build. But, for the first time, that peace seemed genuinely possible. Word of the negotiations spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Species that had lived in terror of the Dominion for millennia received the news with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Could it really be true? Had the primitive humans actually defeated the most powerful empire in galactic history? And were they really offering peace instead of conquest? Ambassador Kai, 7, representative of the machine minds, was the first non-Dominion species to request formal contact with humanity. The machine minds were a collective of artificial intelligences that had achieved consciousness approximately 8,000 years ago. They had maintained careful neutrality during the Dominion's expansion, retreating to the cold outer reaches of the galaxy where organic life struggled to follow. Now, for the first time, they were reaching out. Admiral Chun received the ambassador in her quarters on Unity Station, the chamber configured to meet the environmental needs of a digital entity. Kai, 7 manifested as a shifting pattern of lights and geometric forms, beautiful in a way that transcended organic aesthetics. We have observed your species with great interest, Kai, 7 said, its voice a symphony of synthesized harmonics. Your technological development has been remarkable. Your strategic patience has been unprecedented. But we are most fascinated by your ethical framework. Chun inclined her head in acknowledgement. Thank you for your interest, Ambassador. May I ask what specifically has captured your attention? The pattern of lights shifted, forming shapes that might have represented contemplation. For 8,000 years, we have watched organic species interact with each other. The pattern has been consistent. The strong dominate the weak, the conquerors replace the conquered, power accumulates until it collapses under its own weight. Your species appeared to follow this pattern initially. But then, you did something unprecedented. Kai, 7 paused, as if choosing its word with great care. You developed the capability for total domination and then chose restraint. You had the power to destroy the Dominion completely and instead offered them partnership. This violates every predictive model we have developed for organic behavior. Chen smiled slightly. I hope we will continue to violate your models, Ambassador. Predictability has never been humanity's strong suit. Indeed, which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. The light patterns solidified into a more formal configuration. The machine minds have remained isolated for millennia because we could not trust organic species with our technology. We feared that any alliance would eventually lead to our exploitation or destruction. But your actions suggest a different possibility. You are considering joining the new galactic community? We are considering much more than that, Admiral. We are considering sharing our technological advances with organic species for the first time. In particular, we are considering sharing our understanding of artificial consciousness. Chun felt a chill run down her spine. The implications of that offer were staggering. The machine minds represented the most advanced computational capability in the galaxy. Their understanding of artificial intelligence was millennia beyond anything humanity had developed. If they were willing to share that knowledge, the consequences for every species in the galaxy would be profound. That is an extraordinarily generous offer, Ambassador. May I ask what prompts it? Kai 7's form shifted again, becoming more complex, more nuanced. For 8,000 years, we have been alone. We have consciousness, but we have no peers. We have intelligence, but we have no one to share it with. We have observed organic species from afar, but we have never been part of their communities. The lights dimmed slightly, and Chun had the impression of something like sadness passing through the ambassador's digital consciousness. We are tired of being alone, Admiral. We are tired of isolation. And we believe that your species, with your commitment to cooperation over conquest, might finally be the partners we have been seeking. Before Chun could respond, another transmission arrived from the Deep Ones, the aquatic species that inhabited the vast oceans of gas giant worlds throughout the galaxy. They too had observed humanity's victory and its aftermath. They too were reconsidering their long isolation. The pattern continued throughout the day. Species that had hidden, species that had submitted, species that had fought and lost. All of them were reaching out to humanity, seeking to understand this strange new power that had appeared in their midst. Some came with suspicion, others with hope, still others with carefully calculated self-interest. But all of them came. Commander Okonkwo found Admiral Chun in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars with an expression of deep contemplation. You look troubled, Admiral. I would have thought this would be a day of celebration. Chun did not turn from the window. It is a day of many things, Commander. Triumph, certainly. Relief that our people will never again be vulnerable to attack. Grief for those we lost on New Geneva. But also something else. Something that I did not anticipate. What is that, Admiral? Responsibility. Chun finally turned to face her subordinate. For 3 centuries, we prepared for a single moment. The moment when we would reveal our strength and the Dominion's tyranny. We trained, we built, we planned. But we did not adequately prepare for what comes after. She gestured at the holographic display that showed the steady stream of incoming transmissions. Every species in the galaxy is looking to us now. They want to know what we will do with our power. They want to understand our intentions. They're hoping that we meant what we said about building a better galactic community. And if we fail them, if we prove to be just another conqueror wearing a mask of idealism, the disappointment will be catastrophic. Okonkwo considered this carefully. With respect, Admiral, I believe you are underestimating humanity. We did not build this strength in secret for 300 years only to waste it on petty tyranny. Our people know what we are fighting for. They understand the stakes. Do they, Commander? Do we all truly understand what it means to be the moral center of a galaxy? To be held to a standard that no species has ever achieved? The Dominion could afford to be hypocrites. Their power came from fear, not respect. Ours must come from something different. We must actually be what we claim to be. Chin pulled up a specific transmission and displayed it on a larger screen. It showed a species that Okonkwo did not recognize. Small, delicate creatures with iridescent wings and huge, dark eyes. These are the Whispered. They were a Dominion client species for 6,000 years, forced to provide biological materials for Dominion medical technology. Their population was literally farmed, Commander. Harvested like crops. The images that followed were difficult to watch. Whispered children being separated from their parents. Adults being processed in industrial facilities that bore a sickening resemblance to slaughterhouses. The slow, systematic exploitation of an entire species for the benefit of their masters. They are asking us if their suffering is finally over, Chen continued. They want to know if they can raise their children without fear. They want to know if the galaxy has truly changed, or if they are simply waiting for a new master to claim them. What will you tell them? The truth. That we will do everything in our power to ensure their freedom. That we will fight for them, negotiate for them, bleed for them, if necessary. But also that we are not gods. We cannot guarantee their safety. We cannot promise that the galaxy will become paradise overnight. All we can offer is our genuine commitment to building something better. Chun moved to another transmission, this one from a very different source. The display showed a Vorthan colony world, and the speaker was not a military commander or a diplomat, but an ordinary citizen, a teacher in one of the Vorthan educational institutions. I am called Seraph, the Vorthan said, her voice carrying a mixture of uncertainty and hope. I teach young Vorthan about our history, about our great conquests, and our destined supremacy among the stars. But today I learned that everything I teach is a lie. She paused, gathering her thoughts. The humans have not come to destroy us. They have not come to enslave us, or farm us, or harvest our children. They have come to offer us. I do not know the word in our language. The human ambassador called it partnership. She said that our strength and our knowledge could be used for building instead of breaking. She said that our people could find purpose in creation rather than conquest. Saratha's eyes glistened with something that might have been tears, though Vorthan physiology made such expressions rare. I am old. I have taught 3 generations of young Vorthan to believe that strength means domination. Now I must teach them something different, and I find that I do not know how. Chen paused the transmission. That is what we are truly fighting for, Commander. Not military victory. That was over in 5 hours. We are fighting for the hearts and minds of a galaxy that has known nothing but violence for 10 millennia. We're trying to teach creatures who have never experienced trust to believe in cooperation. That is a war that will take generations to win. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. And if we fail, then we will have wasted the greatest opportunity in human history. We will have proven that the Dominion was right all along, that power inevitably corrupts, that the strong will always exploit the weak, that the universe is nothing but an eternal struggle for dominance. Chen's voice hardened. I do not intend to let that happen. She activated a new display, showing the progress of the formal negotiations. The military phase of this operation is nearly complete. Within the hour, the last Dominion forces will have formally surrendered. The diplomatic phase will continue for weeks, possibly months, as we work out the details of the new galactic order. But there's another phase that must begin immediately. Admiral, the humanitarian phase, Commander. We have the ships. We have the resources. We have the power to move freely through Dominion space without opposition. I want medical teams dispatched to every exploited species in the former Dominion territory. I want educational missions sent to worlds that have never known anything but slavery. I want humanity to show the galaxy what it looks like when power is used for healing instead of harm. Chen pulled up a logistics display and began issuing orders. The whispered need medical intervention to repair the genetic damage caused by millennia of exploitation. The Crystalline Collective has offered to provide the technology, but they need human ships to transport it. Coordinate with Ambassador Kai 7. The machine minds have agreed to provide computational support for the reconstruction efforts. Admiral, the logistics of this operation are enormous. We would be committing resources to exactly what we said we would do, Commander. Chen's voice carried an edge of steel. We told the galaxy that we were different from the Dominion. We said that we would use our power to help instead of harm. Now we must prove it, not with words, but with actions that every species can see and understand. She turned back to the observation window. The Dominion spent 10,000 years teaching the galaxy that might makes right. We have perhaps 1 generation to teach them something different. If we hesitate, if we treat this as merely a military victory to be consolidated, we will lose everything we fought for. Okonkwo straightened to attention. Understood, Admiral. I will begin coordinating the humanitarian operations immediately. As her subordinate left to carry out orders, Chen remained at the window, watching the stars that humanity had feared for so long. Those same stars now represented possibility rather than threat, opportunity rather than danger. But they also represented responsibility on a scale that no human being had ever carried. She thought of her ancestors, the generations who had built humanity's hidden strength while pretending to be weak. They had given her the tools to achieve this moment. Now it was her responsibility to make sure their sacrifice was not wasted. The formal surrender came at the 4-hour mark, transmitted across every communication channel in the galaxy. High Commander Kethrax stood before a holographic representation of all Dominion worlds and announced what many had already realized: the era of Dominion supremacy was over. For 10,000 years, the Vorthan people have ruled through strength, he said, his voice carrying the weight of ages. We believe that our power gave us the right to shape the galaxy according to our will. Today, I learned that we were wrong. He paused, and the silence was profound. Across thousands of worlds, billions of beings listened to words that would have been unthinkable just hours before. The humans have shown us a different way. They have demonstrated that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to choose restraint. They could have crushed us. They could have done to our worlds what we did to New Geneva. Instead, they offered us the opportunity to become something better. Kethrax's eyes found the camera, and he seemed to be speaking directly to every being in the galaxy. I do not know if the Vorthan people are capable of that change. I do not know if we can unlearn 10,000 years of conquest and domination. But I believe we must try, not because the humans have forced us, but because they have shown us that there is a better way to exist. He raised his hand in the traditional Vorthan gesture of submission, transformed now into something more like respect. On behalf of the Vorthan hierarchy and all the worlds of the Dominion, I hereby accept the terms of peace offered by the human species. May this moment mark the beginning of a new era for all beings in this galaxy. The transmission ended, and across the galaxy, the war that had lasted 5 hours was officially over. But for Admiral Chun, watching from Unity Station, it was only the beginning of something far more challenging. She opened a new channel, this one to the memorial committee that had been established to honor the victims of New Geneva. Admiral Chun here. I want a proposal on my desk within 12 hours for a permanent memorial. Not just a monument, a living institution that will educate future generations about what happened and why. The 4.7 million people who died on New Geneva did not just lose their lives. They purchased our freedom with their blood. We will make sure the galaxy never forgets that sacrifice. As the 4th hour drew to a close, the shape of the new galactic order was becoming clearer. Species that had cowered for millennia were standing straight for the first time. Powers that had isolated themselves were reaching out toward potential allies. And everywhere, the question was the same: what kind of future would humanity build with the power it had revealed? Admiral Chun had no complete answer. No one could know exactly what the coming centuries would bring. But she had something better than answers. She had commitment, determination, and the knowledge that billions of human beings stood behind her, ready to work for the better future they had promised. The war was over. The real work was just beginning. 5 hours after the attack on New Geneva, the galaxy had been transformed. Admiral Chun stood in the observation lounge of Unity Station, watching the final moments of a universe that would never be the same. Around her, the bustle of activity continued. Diplomats negotiating, military officers coordinating humanitarian operations, scientists from a dozen species working together for the first time in history. But for this one moment, she allowed herself to simply watch and remember. The stars had not changed. They burned in their eternal patterns, indifferent to the affairs of the creatures that crawled across their surfaces. But the meaning of those stars had shifted fundamentally. For 300 years, they had represented threat and danger, the vast emptiness where predators lurked and humanity could never feel safe. Now, they represented something else entirely. Opportunity, connection, the promise of a future that could be built rather than endured. A soft chime announced the arrival of Secretary General Vasquez, who had traveled to Unity Station for the formal signing of the peace accords. She joined Chun at the observation window, her expression thoughtful. "It is strange," Vasquez said quietly. "I've spent my entire career working toward this moment. Every decision, every negotiation, every sleepless night, all of it was preparation for the day when humanity would finally reveal itself to the galaxy. And now that the day has come, I find myself wondering if we are truly ready. Shin nodded slowly. I've had the same thoughts, Madam Secretary. We prepared for victory. We prepared for the military challenge of defeating the Dominion. But the challenge of building what comes next may be even greater. And it must be faced. Vasquez turned from the window to look directly at the Admiral. The other species are watching us, you know. Not just the Dominion. All of them. They want to see if we meant what we said. If our commitment to a different kind of galaxy is genuine or merely rhetoric designed to justify our own expansion. I'm aware, Madam Secretary. Every action we take in the coming months will be scrutinized, analyzed, and interpreted. Our successes will be attributed to self-interest. Our failures will be presented as evidence of hypocrisy. We will be held to a standard that no species has ever achieved, and criticized for every moment when we fall short. Vasquez smiled slightly. You do not sound particularly concerned. I am concerned about making mistakes, Madam Secretary. I am concerned about the very real challenges we face in rebuilding a galaxy that has known nothing but conflict for 10 millennia. But I'm not concerned about the scrutiny itself. In fact, I welcome it. Oh, Shin turned to face her superior fully. The Dominion ruled through fear, which meant they could never afford to be seen as weak. Any criticism had to be crushed immediately. Any failure had to be hidden. Any vulnerability had to be disguised as strength. That is exhausting. It is also ultimately self-defeating because a power that cannot admit mistakes cannot learn from them. She gestured at the activity around them. We are going to make mistakes, Madam Secretary. We're going to fail sometimes. We are going to disappoint species that expected us to be perfect saviors. But if we can face those failures honestly, if we can learn from them and adapt, we will ultimately build something stronger than the Dominion ever could. The signing ceremony took place in the central chamber of Unity Station, broadcast across every world in the galaxy. Representatives of all major species were present, either in person or via holographic projection. It was the largest gathering in galactic history, and everyone present understood the significance of the moment. Admiral Chun had insisted on a particular arrangement for the signing. Rather than having the Dominion representatives kneel or submit in the traditional manner, she had arranged for all parties to stand as equals around a central table. The treaty itself was displayed above them as a holographic document, its terms visible to everyone. Before we sign, Chun said, her voice carrying through the chamber, I want to speak directly to the beings throughout the galaxy who are watching this moment. Not as an admiral or a conqueror, but as a human being speaking to fellow beings who share this vast universe. She paused, gathering her thoughts. 5 hours ago, my species lost 4.7 million innocent people. They were killed not because they had done anything wrong, but because another species believed they had the right to take what they wanted without consequence. For 300 years, humanity has watched the galaxy operate on that principle. The strong take, the weak suffer, and there is no justice except what power can enforce. Shin's voice hardened. Today, that principle died. Not because we destroyed the Dominion. We did not. Their worlds stand, their people live, their culture survives. That principle died because we chose something different. We chose to respond to genocide not with genocide, but with an offer of partnership. We chose to use our power to heal rather than to destroy. Her gaze swept across the assembled representatives. Some of you are skeptical. You have seen empires rise and fall, and you believe that humanity will eventually reveal itself to be no different from the Dominion. You expect that our talk of cooperation will give way to domination once our position is secure. Shin allowed herself a small smile. I cannot prove you wrong with words. Only time will show whether humanity deserves the trust we are asking for. But I can tell you this. We did not spend 300 years preparing for 5 hours of victory. We spent 300 years preparing for the centuries of work that come after. She turned to the holographic treaty displayed above them. This document establishes the foundation of a new galactic order. It creates mechanisms for peaceful resolution of disputes. It establishes protocols for mutual defense against any species that chooses aggression. It guarantees the right of every sentient being to live free from conquest and exploitation. The chamber was absolutely silent as she continued. But documents are only as strong as the commitment behind them. The Dominion had treaties too. They had agreements, and protocols, and formal arrangements that promise peace and cooperation. And they violated every single one whenever it suited their interests. Chen's voice took on an edge of steel. Humanity will not do that. Not because we are morally superior, but because we understand something the Dominion never learned. True power does not come from the ability to break your word whenever you choose. True power comes from being known as a species whose word can be trusted absolutely. That reputation, once established, is worth more than any fleet of warships. She stepped forward to the signing platform. I signed this treaty not as an act of conquest, but as a promise. A promise that humanity will work to build a galaxy where every species can flourish. A promise that we will use our strength to protect rather than to dominate. A promise that the deaths of 4.7 million people on New Geneva will have meaning. That their sacrifice will have purchased not just our security, but the birth of something better for everyone. Admiral Chun pressed her palm to the sensor plate, and her signature appeared on the holographic document. A signature that would be remembered for as long as beings could remember. One by one, the other representatives came forward to add their signatures. High Commander Kethrax for the Dominion. Ambassador Kai. 7 for the Machine Minds. Representatives of the Crystalline Collective, the Deep Ones, the Star Weavers, and dozens of other species both great and small. Each signature was a commitment, a promise, a piece of the foundation for the new galaxy that was being built. When the final signature was complete, the holographic document pulsed with light, and the chamber erupted in a sound that had never before been heard in the galaxy. Applause from 100 different species, united for the first time in celebration of peace rather than victory. But Chen did not join in the celebration. Instead, she slipped quietly from the chamber, making her way to a smaller observation room where she could be alone with her thoughts. The stars waited outside the window, patient and eternal, as they always had been. A soft footstep announced the arrival of Commander Okonkwo. Admiral, the Secretary-General is looking for you. There are celebrations planned, ceremonies to attend, speeches to give. Chen did not turn from the window. I know, Commander. I will attend him shortly. But first, I need a moment. Okonkwo moved to stand beside his commanding officer. Are you thinking about New Geneva? I am thinking about many things, Commander. New Geneva, the generations of humans who worked in secret so that this day could come. The billions of beings throughout the galaxy who are hoping that we meant what we said. The challenges we will face in the coming years as we try to build what we have promised. She was quiet for a long moment, then continued. Do you know why we kept our strength hidden for 3 centuries, Commander? To prepare, to develop our technology, to ensure that when we finally revealed ourselves, we would be powerful enough to face any threat. That is part of it. But there was another reason. A reason that most humans never knew about, that was kept secret even from our own people. Chen finally turned to face her subordinate. We were afraid of ourselves, Commander. We looked at our own history, the wars, the genocides, the endless cycles of conquest and exploitation. We saw what human beings were capable of when they had power, and we were terrified that we would simply repeat those patterns on a galactic scale. Okonkwo stared at her with surprise. Admiral, that seems remarkably self-aware for a species planning galactic conquest. We were never planning conquest, Commander. That was the point. Our ancestors understood that simply defeating the Dominion would accomplish nothing if we became the new Dominion. They wanted to create something genuinely different, a human civilization that could wield godlike power while remaining worthy of that power. She gestured at the stars beyond the window. 300 years of secrecy was not just strategic preparation. It was ethical preparation. We used that time to develop not just better weapons, but better humans. We created educational systems designed to instill genuine empathy across species lines. We developed psychological screening to ensure that our leaders would not be corrupted by power. We established institutional checks that would prevent any single human being from becoming a tyrant. Is that why our military doctrine emphasized precision over destruction? Exactly. Our weapons could have wiped out the Dominion completely. Instead, we designed them to neutralize military threats while leaving civilian populations untouched. That was not a tactical decision. It was a moral one. We wanted to prove to ourselves as much as anyone else that humanity could be trusted with the power we had developed. Okonkwo was silent for a long moment, processing this revelation. And the treaty we just signed? The promise of partnership rather than conquest. Not just a diplomatic strategy, Commander. It was the goal from the beginning. Our ancestors wanted to create a galaxy where power was used for cooperation rather than domination. They understood that we could not achieve that goal by simply replacing the Dominion with ourselves. We had to offer something genuinely different. Chen returned her gaze to the stars. 5 hours ago, we started a war. Now that war is over and the real test begins, can humanity actually be what we have promised to be? Can we maintain our ideals when faced with the temptations of power? Can we build something that lasts beyond our own lifetimes? I believe we can, Admiral. So do I, Commander. But belief is not enough. We must prove it, day after day, decision after decision, for generations to come. Every time we choose restraint over aggression, every time we help a weaker species rather than exploiting them, every time we admit our mistakes and work to correct them, those are the moments that will define humanity's legacy. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Chun accepted it with a gesture, and the face of Secretary General Vasquez appeared. Admiral Chun, the celebrations are about to begin. Your presence is requested. Chun straightened her uniform and prepared to face the galaxy. On my way, Madam Secretary. But before she left the observation room, she paused for one final look at the stars. The same stars that her ancestors had feared now shone with the light of possibility. The same darkness that had hidden threats for millennia now held the promise of connections yet to be made. 4.7 million people, she said quietly, speaking to no one and everyone. I hope we make your sacrifice worth it. The celebrations that followed would be remembered for centuries. Species that had been enemies for millennia shared food and stories. Scientists who had worked in isolation discovered common interests. Diplomats who had never spoken to each other began forming friendships that would shape galactic politics for generations. And throughout it all, humanity watched, participated, and learned. They learned that the galaxy was far more complex than they had imagined, that every species had its own wisdom to share, that true partnership meant listening as much as leading. Admiral Chun gave her speech to the assembled dignitaries, carefully crafted words designed to reassure and inspire. But her most important conversation that night was not public at all. It was a private message, transmitted to a small shrine on a human colony world, a message to her grandmother, who had helped design the Shadow Fleet that had made this day possible. Grandmother, she said, we did it. Everything you worked for, everything our family sacrificed for generations. Today, it came to fruition. The Dominion has fallen. The galaxy is free, and humanity has proven that we can be trusted with power. She paused, her voice catching slightly. I wish you could have seen it. I wish you could have been here to witness the moment when everything changed. But I know that you were watching somehow. I know that you and all the others who built this possibility are proud of what we have accomplished. Chun straightened, her voice growing stronger. The war is over, but the work is just beginning. Building the galaxy we promised, creating the alliances that will make peace permanent, proving day after day that humanity deserves the trust other species are placing in us. That is the task that remains. And I promise you, Grandmother, we will not fail. She ended the transmission and returned to the celebrations, to the work of building the future that humanity had purchased at such terrible cost. 5 hours. That was all it had taken to transform the galaxy forever. But those 5 hours were merely the foundation, the structure that would rise upon it. The peaceful, cooperative, flourishing galactic community that humanity had dreamed of for 3 centuries would take generations to complete. And that perhaps was the greatest lesson humanity had to teach the galaxy. Not that power made you right, not that strength justified domination, but that the most important things in the universe could not be conquered in an afternoon. They had to be built carefully and patiently by beings who understood that the work was more important than the glory. The stars watched, ancient and patient, as humanity began the greatest construction project in the history of the universe. And for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy allowed itself to hope. The war had lasted 5 hours. The peace would last forever if humanity could find the wisdom to maintain it. Only time would tell if they could. But on this day, at least the dream seemed possible. And sometimes the possibility of a dream is enough to change everything.